Before we start, kindly subscribe to my channel and tell me, where in the universe are you watching from? Asher Kane sat in the pilot's chair of his ship, the Wayfarer, staring at the empty stretch of space beyond the viewport. The ship was old but reliable, built for deep space salvage runs, not for trouble. And yet, trouble always seemed to find him. A red warning light flashed on his console. His scanners had picked up a distress signal, fast-moving, erratic. Asher leaned forward, frowning. A ship was running for its life. Before he could decide what to do, a sleek, silver vessel shot past him. It hull scorched from weapons fire. A second later, 3 dark warships followed, their engines glowing with deadly intent. The radio crackled. "Unknown vessel, I need sanctuary. Hide me, and I will reward you with something no human has ever had." The voice was urgent, but there was something else beneath it. Something that sent a shiver down Asher's spine. He had dealt with aliens before, but this one, her voice was different. Asher hesitated. Getting involved could mean death. The warships chasing her were powerful, their weapons far beyond anything the Wayfarer could handle. But something in his gut told him this wasn't just another fugitive. Making his decision, Asher's fingers flew over the controls. He killed the ship's lights, rerouted all power to stealth systems, and engaged the hull's heat dampeners. The only way to stay hidden was to vanish completely. The mysterious ship latched onto his airlock with a soft clunk, barely making the sound. The warships outside slowed, scanning the area, searching. For long minutes, Asher sat frozen, watching them prowl through the darkness. Then, without warning, they turned and sped away into the void. Silence. He exhaled. What the hell did I just get myself into? A soft hiss filled the cabin as the airlock opened. Asher turned, hand resting near his holster. The moment he saw her, his breath caught. She stepped forward, moving like a shadow, her presence both commanding and otherworldly. The dim lights of the ship reflected off her smooth form, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. There was an elegance in the way she stood, a quiet strength that made Asher forget about the warships outside. "I owe you," she said, her voice softer now, but no less intense. "And I always repay my debts." Asher crossed his arms. "You're gonna have to start by telling me why the hell those warships were chasing you." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then, with a small, knowing smile, she said, "Because I stole something priceless. And now, I'm offering it to you." Asher's pulse quickened. He had no idea what he had just stepped into. But one thing was certain. His life would never be the same again. Asher Kane kept his hand near his holster, his pulse steady but sharp. The alien woman stood before him, calm, despite the danger that had chased her across the stars. "You stole something?" Asher asked, his voice edged with suspicion. "That why they were after you?" She gave a slow nod. "Yes. And now they won't stop hunting me. If they find me, they'll kill me. If they find you with me," she paused, watching his reaction, "they'll kill you too." Asher let out a dry laugh and ran a hand through his dark, tousled hair. "Great. So I just made an enemy of a fleet of warships. Fantastic." He stepped toward the cockpit, checking the ship's long-range scanners. The 3 enemy ships were still in the sector, sweeping the asteroid belt in slow, calculated movements. They weren't giving up. The alien woman moved behind him, her presence oddly soothing despite the tension. "I can make it worth your while," she said. "You saved my life. In return, I'll give you something no human has ever had." Asher turned, narrowing his eyes. "And what exactly is that?" She studied him for a moment, as if weighing whether to tell him the truth. Then she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The secret to unlocking human potential." Asher frowned. "That's vague." She smiled, but there was something in her expression, something knowing. "That's because you wouldn't believe me if I told you." He exhaled, shaking his head. This was insane. His life was supposed to be simple. find abandoned ships, scrap them for parts, and sell what he could. That was it. But now he had a fugitive alien on board, an elite enemy fleet hunting him, and some vague promise of a reward that sounded too good to be true. Still, something about her felt different. She wasn't desperate in the way most fugitives were. She wasn't begging for help. She was offering something. And despite his better judgment, Asher found himself wanting to hear more. "Fine," he said. "But first, we need to get the hell out of here." She nodded. "Do you trust me?" Asher raised an eyebrow. Not even a little. A small laugh escaped her lips, but she didn't seem offended. "Good," she said. "Then at least you're smart." She moved past him, her hands gliding over the ship's control panel. Asher tensed, but before he could stop her, the ship's systems flickered, then surged with new energy. The screen lit up with strange symbols, faster than Asher could follow. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I'm improving your ship," she answered smoothly. "If we're going to survive, we need better cloaking." Asher's jaw tightened, but he couldn't deny what he was seeing. The energy output had changed. The heat signature, normally a faint glow, was now nearly invisible. "Damn," he muttered. "How did you?" "Later," she interrupted. "Right now, I need you to fly." Asher didn't argue. He slid into the pilot's seat, gripping the controls. Outside, the enemy ships were still scanning, unaware that the Wayfarer had just become a ghost. He maneuvered through the asteroid belt with practiced ease, weaving between massive chunks of rock and ice. The scanners remained silent. The warships weren't detecting them. He let out a slow breath. "All right. We might just make it out of this." She leaned closer, her voice warm against his ear. "Told you." For a moment, Asher was aware of how close she was, how her presence sent a strange heat through his chest. He ignored it, focusing on the flight path. He had a feeling this was just the beginning, and he wasn't sure if he should be excited or terrified. Asher gripped the controls of the Wayfarer, guiding the ship carefully through the asteroid belt. The enemy warships were still searching, but their scanners hadn't picked up his vessel yet. Whatever the alien woman had done to the ship's systems, it was working. "Not bad," Asher admitted, keeping his voice low. "They can't see us." Beside him, the woman nodded. "For now." Asher glanced at her. "You got a name?" She hesitated, then spoke. "Sci-Fi." He repeated it under his breath. It was unlike any name he'd heard before, smooth and sharp at the same time. It suited her. Sci-Fi studied the screen in front of her. "We need to leave this sector before they realize we're still here. Your ship isn't built for combat." "Yeah, thanks. I noticed," Asher muttered. He had made a career out of avoiding fights, not winning them. Sci-Fi's fingers danced over the console, her movements precise. "There's a warp gate nearby. If we reach it before they scan this region again, we can escape." Asher nodded and pushed the engines, guiding the Wayfarer through the shifting asteroid field. It was a dangerous path, but better than facing those warships head-on. For a few minutes, everything was quiet. The only sounds were the hum of the ship and the occasional beep from the scanners. Asher allowed himself to relax, just a little. Then the alarm blared. "Incoming energy pulse." Sci-Fi snapped. Asher cursed. The warships were sending out wide-range energy sweeps, designed to catch anything hiding in the belt. If they were hit, even with the cloaking active, the pulse would expose them. "Hold on," Asher shouted. He yanked the controls, diving into a thick cluster of debris. A massive asteroid loomed ahead, its surface rough and cratered. Without thinking, he twisted the ship and hugged the rock's surface, flying so close he could see the cracks in the stone. The pulse wave hit a moment later, a bright flash that rolled over space like a silent explosion. The ship trembled, the systems flickering for a second. Sci-Fi checked the scanner. "They missed us." Asher exhaled, his hand still tight on the controls. "I hate days like this." Sci-Fi turned to him, her expression unreadable. You didn't have to help me. You still don't. Asher met her gaze. Yeah, well, I don't like seeing people get hunted down like animals. A small silence stretched between them. Then Sayeri spoke again, her voice quieter. That's rare among humans. Asher smirked. Guess I'm full of surprises. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Maybe more than you know. The moment was broken by another alarm, this one different. The warp gate was ahead. A massive ring structure, ancient and pulsing with unstable energy, floating in the void. It wasn't the safest escape route, but it was their best shot. Hold on, Asher said again, punching the thrusters. The ship surged forward. Behind them, the enemy warships changed course. They had detected the gate's activation. They were coming. Sayeri's hands moved over the controls. We only get one chance at this. If we don't time it perfectly, we'll be ripped apart. No pressure, Asher muttered. He locked onto the gate's frequency and lined up the ship. The warships were closing in fast. Weapons locked. Asher clenched his jaw and pushed the engines to max. The gate flared, opening into a swirling tunnel of blue and white. And then the Wayfarer shot forward, vanishing into the unknown, just as enemy fire exploded behind them. They were gone. For now, Asher felt the familiar pull of his stomach as the Wayfarer shot through the warp gate, the ship trembling from the force. Bright streaks of blue and white light swirled outside the viewport, stretching endlessly as they moved through the unstable tunnel. Then, with a final jolt, they were out. Space returned to normal, vast and quiet. Stars glittered in the distance, and a massive red gas giant loomed far below. The ship's warning alarms had stopped, leaving only the steady hum of the engine. Asher let out a slow breath and leaned back in his seat. Well, that was fun. Sayeri, sitting beside him, checked the scanners. We made it. The enemy fleet is nowhere in range. They won't find us easily now. Good, Asher said, rubbing a hand over his face. Because I'm really tired of getting shot at today. He turned his chair to face her, watching as she studied the data on the screen. She was focused, precise. Too calm for someone who had just escaped certain death. That made him uneasy. So, he said, arms crossed. You gonna tell me what exactly you stole? Sayeri glanced at him, then back at the screen. I already told you. The key to unlocking human potential. Asher shook his head. Yeah, and that could mean 1,000 things. What kind of potential are we talking about? She hesitated. You wouldn't believe me. Asher smirked. Try me. Sayeri turned fully toward him, her expression unreadable. Human evolution is incomplete, she said. Your species has always been strong, resilient, but there are limits, ones that were placed on you long ago. Asher frowned. Placed on us? By who? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into a hidden compartment on her suit and pulled out a small metallic device. It pulsed with a faint, golden glow. This, she said, holding it up, is the key to breaking those limits. Asher narrowed his eyes. That's what you stole. Yes. He leaned forward, studying the object. It was no larger than his palm, but something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong in this universe. And what exactly does it do? Sayeri's voice was quiet. It rewrites the human body. Strength, speed, intelligence. It unlocks abilities your kind was never meant to have. Asher let out a slow whistle. And your people don't want humans getting their hands on it. She nodded. They believe it's too dangerous, that if humans evolve beyond their current limits, the balance of power in the galaxy will shift forever. Asher ran a hand through his dark hair, processing that. If what she was saying was true, then he understood why those warships had been so eager to catch her. This wasn't just some stolen tech. This was something that could change everything. He exhaled. And you're offering it to me? Sayeri studied him for a long moment. Yes. Why? Her gaze didn't waver. Because you saved my life. And because I think you're the kind of man who won't waste this gift. Asher didn't know how to respond to that. His life had never been about power or destiny. He was just a scavenger, scraping by in the outer systems. But now he was sitting across from an alien fugitive, being offered something that could make him more than human. He leaned back, rubbing his chin. And what happens if I say no? Scieri's lips curved into the smallest smile. Then I leave, and you go back to your life, never knowing what you almost had. Asher smirked. That's a hell of a sales pitch. She tilted her head. Is it working? For the first time since meeting her, Asher wasn't sure what his next move should be. But one thing was clear, his life was never going to be simple again. And a small part of him didn't mind that at all. Asher leaned back in his chair, staring at the glowing device in Scieri's hand. It was small, unassuming, but her words had given it weight. A key to unlocking human potential. Power beyond anything his kind had ever known. And it was his choice. Asher exhaled and crossed his arms. You're really just gonna hand that over? No strings attached. Scieri tilted her head slightly. I wouldn't say no strings. If you take it, there's no going back. My people will never stop hunting you. You'll be marked as an enemy to them, just like me. Asher chuckled dryly. Yeah, well, they already tried to kill me once today. I think I'm past that point. She studied him carefully, as if trying to see inside his mind. Then you accept. He hesitated. He wasn't the kind of guy who dreamed about power. He just wanted to live his life. Keep flying, keep surviving. But something about Scieri's offer felt different, like a door had been opened, and stepping through it would change him forever. Say I take it, Asher said slowly. What exactly happens to me? Scieri held the device between her fingers, turning it slightly. The soft golden glow pulsed, almost like a heartbeat. It bonds to you, she explained. Your body will change. Slowly at first, then faster. Your strength, your mind, your instincts, everything will evolve. You'll become something more than human. Asher's jaw tightened. And what's the catch? A flicker of something passed over her face. Hesitation. Not all who take it survive. Asher let out a breath. Of course. He should have expected that. It was never that simple. Scieri leaned forward, her voice softer now. But you're different, Asher. I see it in you. You have the will to survive this, to become something greater. There was something about the way she said his name that sent a strange warmth through him. He pushed that feeling aside, focusing on the decision in front of him. He could say no, go back to his old life, keep running salvage jobs, keep avoiding trouble. Or he could take the risk. Change everything. His fingers hovered over the device. It felt warm, even without touching it. Scieri watched him closely. I won't force you, she said. But if you take it, you won't be alone. I'll help you through it. Something in her voice made his chest tighten. It wasn't just about the device. She was offering more than just power. She was offering trust. Asher let out a slow breath. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he reached forward and took the device. The moment his fingers wrapped around it, a pulse of energy shot through his body. He gasped as heat spread through his veins, his vision blurring for a split second. It wasn't pain, at least, not exactly. It was change. Something deep in his body was shifting, like an engine waking up after centuries of rest. Scieri's hand touched his arm, grounding him. Breathe, she said gently. He did. The sensation faded, leaving only a strange hum beneath his skin. He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope. Asher tightened his grip around the device. He had no idea what he had just started, but there was no turning back now. And, deep down, he wasn't sure he wanted to. A deep warmth pulsed beneath Asher's skin, spreading through his veins like a slow-burning fire. He gripped the edge of the ship's control panel, his breathing uneven. Sayeri stood beside him, watching carefully. It's starting. He swallowed hard. Yeah, I noticed. It wasn't painful, at least not yet. But it was intense. His muscles tensed, his heartbeat pounded in his ears, and his mind felt sharper. He could hear the faint hum of the ship's systems clearer than before, like every sound had been amplified. How long does this last? He asked, his voice tight. It varies, Sayeri said. Some changes will happen quickly, others will take time. Asher nodded, though his head felt light. He pulled himself upright, shaking off the strange dizziness. Sayeri reached out, but hesitated before touching his arm. Do you need to rest? Asher exhaled and ran a hand through his dark hair. I don't know. I feel. He stopped mid-sentence as something flickered in his vision. A movement too fast to be normal. He turned his head quickly, eyes darting toward the ship's viewport. His gaze locked onto the distant gas giant outside, but something else had caught his attention, something on the ship's display screen. He stepped forward, narrowing his eyes. A small blinking red dot hovered at the edge of the radar. A ship. We're not alone, he muttered. Sayeri was instantly at his side. Where? Asher tapped the screen. Here. It's small, but it's following us. Sayeri frowned. You shouldn't be able to detect that yet. Asher turned to her. What do you mean? She studied him for a long moment. Your senses are already evolving. Asher looked back at the display. He had spent years flying ships, dodging trouble, surviving. His instincts had always been sharp, but this was different. He had noticed the ship before the scanners even registered it properly. He clenched his fist, feeling the energy still pulsing in his veins. Well, evolved or not, we have a problem. That ship is tailing us. Sayeri quickly checked the controls. It's not one of the warships. The signature is different. Pirates. Asher guessed. Possibly. Sayeri's expression darkened. Or worse. Asher turned to her. Worse. She hesitated. There are others who want this technology. Not just my people. If they realized I had it, they'd be willing to kill for it. Asher exhaled. Great. So now we have more enemies. Sayeri tapped the screen, running a quick analysis. They haven't attacked yet. Maybe they're waiting. Waiting for what? She looked at him, her expression serious. For you to fully change. A cold feeling settled in Asher's stomach. Whoever was out there, they knew about the device, and they weren't in a hurry to stop him. They wanted to see what he would become. He turned back to the controls. Well, I don't like being watched. Sayeri nodded. Then let's lose them. Asher grinned. Now you're speaking my language. He grabbed the controls and pushed the Wayfarer into full throttle. The ship surged forward, breaking away from the planet's orbit. The distant vessel responded, accelerating to match their speed. Sayeri's fingers danced over the controls. There's a debris field ahead. If we maneuver through it fast enough, we might shake them. Asher smirked. Hold on tight. The ship plunged toward the asteroid belt, dodging massive chunks of rock and ice. Asher felt his reactions sharpening. His hands moved before his mind could fully process, weaving the ship through the deadly field with precision. Sayeri glanced at him, her eyes full of something like admiration. Your reflexes. Asher didn't answer. He was too focused, too locked in. Every movement felt right, like the ship was an extension of his body. Behind them, the pursuing vessel struggled to keep up. Then, a sudden explosion. One of the asteroids shattered, sending a shockwave through space. The enemy ship veered off course, alarms flashing on its hull as it spun out of control. Asher grinned. Looks like we just got our first win. Sayeri exhaled. For now. Asher leaned back, feeling the rush of adrenaline. But beneath that excitement, the energy in his veins still pulsed, still changed him. and something told him this was only the beginning. Asher's heart pounded as the Wayfarer burst free from the asteroid field, leaving the damaged enemy ship spinning behind them. The moment the scanners confirmed no more pursuers, he finally let out a breath. "That was fun," he muttered, his grip still tight on the controls. Sayeri shot him a look. "You call that fun?" Asher smirked. "Beats getting shot at in open space." She sighed, but didn't argue. Instead, she turned her attention back to the ship's systems. "We should be safe for now, but they'll send more. You need time to adjust to your changes before we face them again." Asher leaned back, feeling the strange energy still pulsing in his body. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. His mind was clearer, his reflexes sharper. Even now, he could hear the faint hum of the ship's core, the subtle shift in air pressure as the vents adjusted. Everything felt more alive. "What else is going to happen to me?" he asked, flexing his fingers as if testing them. Sayeri hesitated. "The process is unpredictable. Some abilities will come naturally, others will take time." Asher raised an eyebrow. "Abilities?" She nodded. "Strength, speed, heightened senses, and eventually, something more." "Something more?" Sayeri met his gaze. "Your body isn't just adapting, Asher. It's evolving into what humanity should have been." He exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. It was a lot to take in. A few days ago, he was just a scavenger, scraping by in the outer systems. Now he was changing. Sayeri studied him. "How do you feel?" Asher thought for a moment. "Like I'm standing on the edge of something big." She nodded slowly. "You are." There was something in her voice, something almost gentle. Asher had never known an alien like her before. He had met plenty of species in his travels, but Sayeri was different. She wasn't just some fugitive with stolen tech. She believed in him. That realization made his chest tighten. He wasn't sure if it was the effects of the device or something else entirely, but the air between them felt different now. Charged. Sayeri turned away, checking the ship's nav data. "We should rest while we can. Your body will need time to adjust." Asher watched her for a moment before nodding. "Yeah, good idea." He stood up, but as soon as he took a step, a sudden rush of energy surged through him. His vision blurred for a second, then snapped back into focus. Only now, everything was clearer. He could see the smallest details on the control panel. He could hear the faintest mechanical clicks deep within the ship. Even the air smelled sharper, like he was noticing scents that had always been there, but had never registered before. Sayeri turned just in time to see him steady himself against the console. "Asher." He shook his head. "I'm fine. Just..." "Whoa." She stepped closer, searching his expression. "What happened?" Asher exhaled. "It's like, I see everything differently now. I hear more. Feel more." He flexed his hands. "And I think I just got a whole lot stronger." Sayeri nodded, her gaze unreadable. "It's happening faster than I expected." "That a good thing or a bad thing?" She hesitated. "It means you were ready for this, but it also means the transformation will be intense." Asher smirked. "Intense is kinda my thing." Sayeri didn't smile. Instead, she placed a hand on his arm, her touch firm but not forceful. "You're changing, Asher, but you're still you. Don't lose that." For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the ship, the distant stars outside. It was like the entire universe had gone quiet. Then Sayeri pulled back. "Get some rest," she said softly. "Tomorrow, we figure out what you've truly become." Asher watched her walk away, his mind racing. Because, deep down, he knew, tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same again. Asher's eyes snapped open. For a moment, he didn't move. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling of the Wayfarer, listening. He could hear everything. The faint hum of the ship's engines, the soft beeping of the navigation system, even the quiet breathing of Sci-Fi in the next room. It wasn't normal. Before, these sounds had been background noise, too faint to notice. Now, they were clear, like his mind had stretched beyond what was humanly possible. He exhaled and sat up. His muscles felt different, stronger, more controlled. He clenched his fist and felt an unfamiliar power beneath his skin, humming like an untapped source of energy. He had changed, and there was no going back. Asher stood, pulling on his jacket before heading toward the cockpit. The moment he stepped in, Sayeri turned from the control panel. She had been waiting for him. "How do you feel?" she asked. Asher rolled his shoulders. "Like I could rip this ship apart with my bare hands." Her expression didn't change. "You probably could." He blinked. "Wait, you're serious?" Sayeri nodded. "Your body has already begun adapting. Strength, speed, heightened senses. But that's only the beginning." Asher leaned against the control panel. "All right, so what's next? Do I wake up tomorrow with laser vision?" Sayeri shook her head. "Your abilities will keep developing, but the real test isn't your power, it's your mind." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer. "You're more than human now, Asher, but that means you'll have to control something most people never do." His jaw tightened. "And what's that?" Sayeri's gaze locked onto his. Instinct. Asher felt something stir deep inside him. Something primal, something waiting to be unleashed. He clenched his fist again, feeling the power simmer just beneath the surface. "That's what they want, isn't it?" he muttered. "The ones hunting us. They want to see what happens when I lose control." Sayeri nodded. "Exactly. They don't just want the technology. They want to know if a human can survive it." Asher exhaled. "So I'm the experiment." She stepped even closer, her voice softer now. "No, you're the proof." He looked at her, searching her expression. She wasn't just saying this to make him feel better. She believed it. The air between them felt charged again, like it had the night before. Sayeri had risked everything to protect him. And Asher, he wasn't just doing this for himself anymore. He was doing it for her too. "So what's our next move?" he asked. Sayeri glanced at the ship's display. "We can't stay in open space. There's a neutral zone nearby, a hidden station where we can lay low and get answers." Asher smirked. "A lawless outpost full of criminals and mercenaries. Sounds like my kind of place." Sayeri didn't smile. "It won't be safe." "It never is," Asher said. She studied him for a moment, then finally nodded. "Then let's go." Asher moved to the controls and set the course. The engines roared to life, pushing the Wayfarer forward into the unknown. But this time, Asher wasn't just running. He was ready. For the first time, he wanted them to come. Because now, he wasn't just a scavenger. He was something more. And whoever came after them next was about to find out exactly what that meant.